All right, everyone. Welcome to the third week of Beauj Box 2025. We are finally getting into, we're getting into the first of the 10 crews that we're getting into. We're tasting this little baby today. It's delicious, by the way. I just tasted it. 2023 Yann, Bertrand, Les Bambins. Amour is what we're tasting today. Yeah, pretty excited to start getting into the cruise. This is where we start really getting into the different soil types and what makes different and all of that. But we're gonna kick it all off with Amour, which is the very first, most northerly crew of them all. So you will all have this in the attachment in the Google Drive, but you already have access to these maps. But we're gonna start with a French map called France, or a file called France. So if you look at the French map, you all know where Beaujolais is. You should be pretty familiar with where Beaujolais is at this point. It's the southern tip of Burgundy, essentially, north of Rhone, going to to the west there's Loire, to the south there's Rhone, and to the east, north of Burgundy, to the north there's Burgundy, and to the east we have basically Savoie and Jura. But yeah, that little light pink region. And then if you look at the map called Beaujolais, you'll see that the very first, the most northerly crew, Amour, is where we are today. So we're gonna start from there, and then we're gonna start working way down to all the way down to Côte de Beauj, being the 12th week of the Beauj Box 5.0. If you look at the soil map, the Beaujolais soil map that you should all have access to, and if you zoom in to the top of that, you will see how Amour, there's various different colors. There's some stripes, there's pinks, there's some green, dark green, there's also red, but light salmon, brown with the red dots. So as you can imagine, it is one of the smallest crew of them all, of all the 10, but it is also one of the most diverse crews in terms of the soil types. You kind of get a cocktail of everything here. You get the blue volcanic, schist, granite, pink granite, clay, alluvial soil, sandstone, I mean, you name it. So it's one of the things that makes Amour really exciting and interesting, and this also being north, a little bit cooler than the rest. So, and then it's a little bit higher in elevation in on an average. So you tend to get these really light, bright, fresh kind of expression of Gamay, which I really enjoy personally. And Amour is definitely one of the enduring kind of crews of them all. It's hard to find them because there's not much wine made there, and also unfortunately Amour, and we'll talk about this in a second, the Amour, that name means angel of love, right? Saint, the angel, and then the amour, meaning love. It's both a blessing and a curse, and we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, here the name of the game is large co-ops, really big cooperative and commodity wines, bulk wines that run. So it's you kind of have to do your homework to find a right producer who's making it the right way. But when you do find the right producer, a thoughtful producer making it from the right site, the expression here can be really, really lovely. Like I mentioned, this is the most northerly crew of them all. Butts up right against Mâconnais, which is the most southern tip of the Burgundy in terms of the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay country. So that kind of a limestone starts to carry down here a little bit, but this is where it starts to cut off and it becomes much more granitic, and also as well as all the other soil types that I mentioned. If you ever come across a Beaujolais Blanc, which is not super common, it's not super rare either, but it's basically Chardonnay grown in Beaujolais instead of Burgundy. But if you do find Beaujolais Blanc, the chances are it comes from Amour, or just outlying region around there, just because this is the most northerly part, which butts up against Burgundy, and the Chardonnay does really well in limestone, and Burgundy is found in limestone. So all that limestone carry through from Burgundy is what gives the Chardonnay a really good kind of acid backbone and mineral backbone and all of that. So if you ever come across Beaujolais Blanc, the chances are it comes from this area near Amour, but not always, but yeah, chances are that's probably a good chance it's there. This shows, if you look at the Beaujolais map, the Saône River, there's a river that runs through the eastern part of Beaujolais. does it influence some of that? There's some alluvial soil, meaning it's the wash bed of the river, any kind of a body of water that's flowing. So all the alluvial soil that rises into Beaujolais comes from this river, and also gives a little bit of moderating influence from having just a body of water. But yeah, the Saône River runs through the eastern part of Beaujolais. Most of the vineyards in this Saint-Amour cru sits on the western slope of this river, facing south and southeast, meaning more sunlight, around 800 to 1,300 feet in elevation. Again, not super high, but in terms of Beaujolais, speaking of Beaujolais, it's one of the, it has a decent amount of elevation. The really cold kind of wind, the continental wind that comes down from the north, it kind of gets blocked out by some of these hills, kind of a higher elevation that sits here. And then this being the south and southeast exposure, the fruit gets a ton of sunlight hours, which meaning it helps with the ripening. But the natural acidity, it is just being a little bit higher in the elevation. So cooler weather than some of the rest of parts of Beaujolais. So you get that really good acidity, again, really bright, that acid backbone with a bright red berry kind of a flavor profile, which is what kind of characterizes Saint-Amour. The clay in the soil also gives the wines a kind of an intense fruit. Anytime the wines grow on clay, it tends to give a lot more of that kind of fruit pop. All that water retention kind of gives it that ability to do so. But the limestone here that carries through from Burgundy also gives it that kind of the acid backbone. So that's kind of why I like it, right? You all know that I'm an acid head, so it's got that really searing, good acid backbone with the bright, tart, ripe red berries that are in there, which is always delicious if you ask me. That's particularly the style of Beaujolais that I like. I mentioned earlier the Saint-Amour, the name is kind of a blessing and a curse, but the name Saint-Amour actually comes from a Roman soldier named Amour in the 4th century, who escaped persecution by converting to Christianity. There he founded a church here near Saint-Amour, and hence the mission, and hence the name Saint-Amour. This is where the name comes from. And then about that blessing and the curse, because it's named after an angel of love. I mean, who doesn't like that, right? So as you can imagine, every Valentine's Day, every wedding, this wine does really well. Any kind of celebration of romance, couples, certain times, even Christmas, it does really well. It is heavily marketed because of that name. It's heavily marketed to couples, anniversaries, weddings, holidays, Valentine's Day, all those things. The blessing of all that is that, quite frankly, the rest of Beaujolais, as the price has been going up, and I've said this, and most of you have been joining me for the last 5 years, you've seen the price of Beaujolais go up. I sound like such a old grandpa when I say things like, I remember back when, Beaujolais used to cost under $20, cru Beaujolais, wholesale price. But now those are well into high 20s, if not into 30s. So price inflation that's happening all across everywhere in wine, but Beaujolais is no exception. So with that, and then there's a lot of kind of a misconception around Beaujolais, falling out of style, falling out of fashion, falling out of just what's hip and cool, not as much as it used to. So anyways, the sale of Beaujolais has been kind of declining. All the other crus, except for the main ones like Morgon, Fleury, that kind of hold steady. But outside of that, it's been kind of dropping. Beaujolais has not been, as a whole region, has not been super hasn't fared super well in modern times in terms of sales volume. However, Saint-Amour is one of the only few, if not, it's one of the only few that where the sales volume is actually growing every year. Again, it's because of that name, right? The name, the heavily marketed effort, and all of that, which is great. But because there's that volume, there's an easiness, right? It's kind of a low-hanging fruit where the name sounds good, put on some cute little label. You guys all remember Domaine Biard, which is a Saint-Amour producer that we featured on Beauj Box a few times. It has a really cute Cupid on the label, right? Like that kind of marketing effort makes it really easy to sell wine, especially around special times throughout the year. So the kind of the trade structure has been less about quality and more about quantity. So yeah, it's all about trying to meet that demand at a certain time of the year, so that jack up the production level to kind of meet that demand, and then there's a less focus on quality. But again, like I said, the homework has to be done on your part, on the consumer's part, to kind of find out who's doing what. So yeah, these kind of a large scale, no soul profit driven negociants and cooperatives kind of gobble up a lot of the fruit and then vineyards here. But yeah, as you look closely, you'll find that there are people who are making it correctly, making it from the right sites, really carefully, and a pretty amazing wines that are coming out of here. So that's kind of both kind of the curse and the blessing. That's what I mean. Let's see. So who makes this wine? His name is Yann, Bertrand. There are pictures of Yann himself. I'll attach a picture of Yann, picture of his family, Anik, and Yann and Guy Bertrand, which are his family, mom and dad. He's a young guy. Young guy who's kind of carrying on the torch of all the natural wine movement. He learned from the kind of the gurus and icons from this region. Some of them is like Jean Foillard, one of the Gang of Four. He learned from him, as well as Yves Matrat, and all these different really reputable names that were kind of the forefathers of the natural wine movement, part of that movement to kind of get away from the conventional farming and conventional winemaking and get into natural winemaking. And he learned from the masters, essentially. And then now he's carrying that torch, and he's paving the way for the kind of future of Beaujolais. So exciting guy to watch. His wine is always delicious. It's not always, he shies away from using sulfites, so his wines are completely 0-0. So there's no sulfites added in any of his wines. And depending on the vintage, depending on the cuvee, some of the wines can be very, very, quite frankly, a little fucked. But when it hits, when it's right, his wines are incredible. It's lively, it's electric. I mean, there's certain energy and tension about them, but beautiful fruit. I mean, it's really, really what made me fall in love with the natural wine and Beaujolais in the first place, is essentially kind of the styles that he learned and he's trying to carry on. So his family, his dad as well as his grandfather are involved in the winemaking, or at least grew grapes. His dad was a vigneron, so made wine. But despite being a son of a vigneron and growing up in Fleury, which is one of the crews that we're going to cover in a couple weeks, Yann never thought of actually becoming a winemaker. So he actually went to university, but after attending university, he traveled around French Alps for a few years, but then he soon found himself working at like the local wine bars and wine shops. He's traveling, just got out of college, didn't have a whole lot of money, just need to make some money. So he told people that he was a son of a vigneron, and then so he got hired at these local wine bars and wine shops, and then all of a sudden he found himself surrounded by these really passionate and geeky winemakers and winemakers who often just come to the shops and the bars to deliver wines themselves. And that's where he kind of developed his passion and interest and curiosity about being a winemaker. So he returned back to Beaujolais, his homeland, and then he began to learn from, like I mentioned, the incredible circle of producers that he never knew before, including Jean Foillard, like I mentioned, Yves Matrat. So yeah, icons. So he learned from the best of the best, or at least what defined the natural wine movement. That's what put Beaujolais on the maps, and those people he's who he learned from. He and his parents farm 7.5 hectares, a block known as a Grand Prix. We have some wine from Grand Prix that Zordan, that a lot of you guys remember that Fox label on the wine, the Beaujolais that we've perpetually always liked every year. That Fox wine, but remember it has a spaceman on it. That's a Fleury that comes from Grand Prix. So this is the same vineyard. So it's a block of vineyards, 7.5 hectare block. So they farmed the 7.5 hectares in Grand Prix in Fleury. Vineyards are 30 to 110 years old, so some really, really old vines in here. In fact, I am attaching in your Google Drive. There will be 2 pictures you'll see. One named Goblet Train Game, the other one Goblet Game 2. You will see some of these gnarly looking, it almost looks like an alien arms coming out. I love these old vine, bush train vines. But yeah, these are very traditional, classic style. They don't use in Beaujolais at least. It was never trellised. There are some vineyards now that trellis, but in general, when you're talking about Beaujolais, you're talking about goblet, or at least the traditional old vineyards. You're talking about goblet methods, which is what it looks like. It's just untrained, just kind of a bush vine that grows. It looks super cool. What did I say? Oh yeah. So 7.5 hectares Grand Prix, 30 to 110 years old, planted on really fine sandy granitic soil, very typical of this region. Yann's parents have been slowly moving to direction of organic farming since they took over the family domain in 1992. And in 2013, with the help of Yann, the entire vineyard was certified organic. So now they farm certified organic. Yann also took on 1.5 hectares on his own, and he farms it using biodynamic principles. So there's some of that as well. There's a unusually small harvest in 2015 and 2016 were really hard vintages in Beaujolais and Burgundy as well. There's a really small harvest that happened in 2015, and in 2016 there was like a terrible frost. It's kind of like the 2021 vintage. We've actually tasted the 2021 vintage. There was a huge frost that just happened in Beaujolais. They wiped out a lot of yield and harvest for a lot of producers. So Yann actually created a line of negociant wines in 2016. Négoce or négociant is a French term for people who buy wines from other winemakers. And then they'll usually slap on their own label and then sell it off under their name. So they can either, actually it doesn't even have to be just wine. It can be finished wine. It could be the must before it ferments. It could be the grapes themselves. But you're basically purchasing the fruit, the must, or the finished wine from someone else, and then turning it into a finalized product, whether you blend it, you age it differently, or sometimes you just put on the exact same wine that the person made and then just put a different label on it. So that's usually what négociant or négoce project is. So he started in 2016 a négociant project working with like-minded kind of farmers, just kind of hedge the risk, because they were only farming fleury, and when those catastrophic things happen, they kind of lose their and I mean their livelihood is on the line. You know what I mean? So just to kind of hedge their risk, he started working with different farmers and different crews to kind of supplement their fleury production. And so that happened in 2016. But he's having learned from the original masters of natural wine. He's very, very kind of rigid in terms of what kind of a farming practice and what kind of a vinification takes place. So the vineyards must be plowed and farmed without any chemical pesticides or fertilizers. Grapes are always purchased sur pied, which means it's purchased on vines, essentially what it means. What that means is that they have the different grower, they're farming it all, that come harvest time is the Yann's team that go out there and actually harvest the grapes themselves. It's just another way of controlling when it gets picked, which berries and which bunches they get to keep or what they get to pick, and all of that stuff. Vinification is only done with the native yeast and no sulfites at any point. It's basically his kind of a tenets, his kind of a motto on his wines. And then he makes wine from Amour, which is what we have. So this is not, he doesn't farm this himself, even though he harvests it himself and his team. But Amour, Morgon, Beaujolais Lantigny, we have tasted that right first week, as Julienat, as well as other kind of regional Beaujolais and Beaujolais village appellations as well. But yeah, basically anytime you see anything outside of fleury from Yann Bertrand or his family, know that it's a négociant project, that the fruits are purchased. Only ones in the fleury are the ones that are estate fruit, meaning they farmed it themselves. Alright, so what is this wine? Also, I included a picture of a Bertrand family's estate. The reason I included that is I mentioned this last week as well, but if you ever get a chance to go and visit this place, it is a beautiful kind of pastoral places. Like the winemakers are not, I mean, they're obviously big corporate, cooperative and negotiation projects that are out there as well. But most producers, particularly the ones that we feature, they look like this. It's like somebody's house, and then like the garage is their winery. So super fun, super cool, going and tasting their wine in their garage. And these are like the rock star winemakers. I mean, these are like, name like Yann, Bertrand, and particularly Jean Foyard, Yvan Metral. Those are like they're known world and over. So if you go anywhere in the world, if you are hanging out with the wine geeks, if you mention those names, they'll know, but you're going to their house to taste their wines, which is super cool. So highly recommend it. You go there and check it out when you get a chance. All right, so this wine is 55 to 65-year-old vines, so not as old as their 110-year-old vines. But again, these are purchased fruit, they didn't farm it themselves. It's not estate fruit. 55 to 65-year-old organic Gamay, harvest from 1.1 hectare parcel from Côte de Besset, that's the name of the vineyard, on the hilltops of Saint-Amour. So very, very small parcel. We're talking about a very small fraction of a Saint-Amour that we're tasting here. Very kind of a one snapshot of a Saint-Amour. But hand harvested, all sorted, temperature controlled, meaning cold. They basically cool it down during the carbonic maceration. But this is semi-carbonic, just to kind of give you an idea of what this tastes like. So semi-carbonic for 17 days, no pump over. So the pump over means, so this is a cap management. So when you make wines, all the skins and stems, all those things that are there, you got to keep it wet. Otherwise, they flow up to the top and the wine is below. But you got to keep it wet, otherwise they can rot. So a lot of times you can punch it down. Pigeage is a French name for it. You can punch it down to keep it wet, or you can pump it over. You can pump from the bottom and basically pour it all over. Pump over is considered like a less aggressive way of extracting color, flavor, phenolics, like tannin and things like that. So and the whole point of doing carbonic in the first place, like we talked about, is to extract less phenolics, and it's more about purity of the fruit. So no pump over being done during the fermentation. No added sulfites, native yeast only. I mean, all the things that we talk about here on 6 Foot Wine Club. Aged in small neutral barrels for, so that's all done in concrete tank, and then it's aged in small neutral barrels for 8 months. So that's something a little bit different from what we've had so far, right? Everything else so far up till has been cement, but here now we're getting some barrel aging. But the first week was actually Fougera, so gigantic barrel. But now we're getting into smaller barrel, but also neutral. There's no new oak on here. The difference between big Fougera and a small barrel, what it does to the final resulting style of wine, is that there's more oxygen. So in barrel, there's an oxygen, micro-oxygenation that happens. The exchange of oxygen from the outside to the inside of the barrel that happens through the little staves and the wood grains in the barrel. And as smaller the barrel is, higher the ratio of that juice to oxygen. So the barrel wines that are aged in a smaller barrel tends to have a little more oxidative kind of quality to them. Not enough to where like you're gonna get nutty and all of that, but it just rounds out things. When the wine has been exposed to oxygen, it kind of rounds out the edges, makes it a little bit softer, kind of sands off the kind of sharp edges. In Fougera, there's the same thing, but there's less oxygen there. So yeah, that's kind of the difference. And sometimes you see a little more overt oxidative quality. You can even get a little more also wood quality if it's not fully neutral, right? If it's like a second fill or third fill, meaning it's the second or third time that barrel has been filled, you still get a little bit of that wood flavor left over, especially in smaller barrels versus the larger barrels, right? Because there's a larger volume of wine to the amount of wood that's present, so if that makes sense. So yeah, let's see when we get to tasting this, we can see the evidence of that, the small neutral barrel aging here versus the Fougera or the concrete that we've tasted so far. And then finally, so after 8 months of aging in small neutral barrels, is racked, meaning let the wine settle and all the clear portion gets siphoned off. Racked, and then it's bottled without filtering or fining. And then they also, being a follower of biodynamics, it's bottled according to the lunar cycle, meaning there's a root day, there's a leaf day, there's a fruit day, there's all these different kind of days in the lunar cycle. So they probably bottle it when it is a fruit day, I would imagine. But that's the most popular one. I don't know, some people maybe bottle it when it's a leaf day. But the idea is that the wine expresses themselves differently depending on the lunar cycle. A lot of people who subscribe to biodynamics believe in this principle. But I don't know if I'm not a huge 100% believer in all of that, but I do know that depending on the day, though, for some reason, wines taste different. It's part of what's fun about, maybe frustrating, but what's fun about wine. It's not ever living, breathing thing, and there's probably a lot of things that I don't understand. Maybe it is true. Maybe the wines actually do, particularly the ones that are made according to the lunar cycle, maybe do really taste different when it's open, depending on when it's open. But I don't know. No science there. Yet, at least. Cool. Let's taste the wine. All right. Let's start with the appearance. Let me get this poured out. All right. Appearance. So this wine is definitely, it's a little hazy, right? I mean, you can tell this wine is not filter refined. In fact, there's a certain level of haze or cloudiness that runs through. It's not translucent at all, which is great. I would call it faulty, but it's just not a filter refined wine. Intensity. I think I'm on. This is like high end the medium, lower end the deep. Getting to the point where like I can't really see through the core of it. So yeah, I'm gonna call this like medium plus intense. Color of ruby. Yeah, this is about as ruby gets, so I'm gonna say it's ruby. No legs or tears. We're gonna talk about that. No deposit, no pétillance, no sediment, anything like that in my glass. Yeah, like a glass of red wine. Nose. Smell. Oh, first of all, this smells fucking fantastic. Alright, this wine is sound. Is this wine clean? I mean, you decide, right? Like, there's definitely a little bit of like a lifted VA here, not like over the top. So VA is a volatile acidity. Wines that particularly have not had any added sulfites can display this volatile acidity. It can show up quite a bit. By the way, every wine has volatile acidity. There's no wine that does not have any volatile acidity. And so at a higher dosage, it can be considered a fault. When it's really high, it can smell like almost like a nail polish, one of those like permanent marker smells. But at a lower dosage, it can be like, pleasant like balsamic vinegar or like apple cider vinegar or something like that. But like, there's a touch of that here. I wouldn't say like over the top. I think it is adding to the quality of this wine. I think that volatile acidity is lifting up all that really bright red fruit out of here. Like it's making it even poppier and brighter. So I'm not gonna call this faulty, but I don't know if I would call this one clean, right? It smells like something that has not been sulfur. It's 0-0 wine, and then it's kind of wild, right? By the way, VA, fault in general, it's more of a subjective tolerance thing more than anything else, and typicity, quote unquote. I hate that word sometimes. Sometimes I think it's a good thing, but sometimes I think it limits things. It's fucking terrible. But it's a typicity plays a lot into it, like typical Tuscany wine, Brunello, Chianti, have some lifted VA in there. But we don't see that as a fault. It's just the character. It's a typicity of that wine, right? But if you were to get VA, let's say in, I don't know, Bordeaux, you'd be like, oh no, there's something wrong with this wine. So is it really the presence of VA that's what's making it faulty? Is it the amount that's making it faulty? What if there's a touch of maybe elevated VA in Bordeaux, but it is not dominant, it's not overwhelming, it's not putting the wine out of balance, it's lifting maybe some of this brightness out of the wine? Is that really necessarily a bad thing? So these are the kind of questions that we should ask ourselves when we're talking about, is this wine faulty or not? A lot of conventional people who grew up in wine with the very conventional wines and have the conventional wine palate would smell like something like this, and immediately they would wave it off and say, this is faulty. I mean, this is like vinegar. This is something went wrong. But is it? You know, and for the longest time in human history, these are probably the kind of wines that we drank, right? Because there were no sulfites available before 70s and 80s. Back in like 20s and 30s, we're making wines with no sulfites. The way our great grandfathers used to make wines is probably more similar to this than what we have been drinking in last 30 decades or so. So, who's to say what's faulty? Now, maybe sulfiting the shit out of your wine and killing off all the bacteria and germs that gives off different kind of aromas and flavors to the wine, maybe that's faulty. Maybe that's a dead wine, right? Thought, food for thought, but I'll get off my soapbox, but you think about that. But anyways, for all intents and purposes for this wine, I'm not gonna say this wine is faulty. I'm gonna say this one is sound, but this wine is maybe not clean. A little bit of lifted VA, little bit of dirt here, little funk. Yeah, but it's great. I mean, these are the kind of things again that made me fall in love with natural wine, Beaujolais. I was like, wow, I didn't realize like wines could be like this. So yeah, intensity. Smelling here, so a few inches. I'm gonna say medium plus. It's quite expressive. Medium plus aromas of, what do we got? Definitely got some floral component here, but it's not typical violet, right? We've been calling violet in the first 2 weeks, but here I'm going more to like rose petals, much more like a red flower. In fact, both the flower and the fruit here all going to red, and that's exactly what Saint Amour is. Saint Amour is all in the red. So I'd say some rose petals here, maybe a little even dried rose petals, but fresh rose petals. Some sort of like a red kind of a flower is what it comes to me. No green, no citrus, no stone fruit, no tropical. Here you go, red. This is like cranberry. This is red cherry. Some like a red plum, red currant. I mean, just a ton of red fruit. I don't get much black fruit to tell you the truth here. Yeah, in fact, I don't get any black fruit. This is all to me very much in the red. Dry cooked fruit? No, this one is like super fresh. The fruit is ripe, maybe even just like slightly before it gets the full peak of ripeness. But like I wouldn't go as far as under ripe, calling it like a green or anything. But yeah, this one is definitely fresh, ripe, a ton of that fresh fruit, but also the fruit quality here. And this is where the semi-carbonic comes in. I get the fresh fruit, right? Like I get a ton of the actually like the fresh cranberry, fresh strawberry, things like that. I also get some of that like lifted high tone stuff here. And I think VA is also helping with that. And when I say it's lifting up those fruit, like those red berries and red fruits are really popping out of this wine for me. And then it's just fresh, and it's like a little bit of that like Sour Patch Kid, like strawberry, that red flavor. Is that even cherry? Is that strawberry? I don't know about that. Like, that red Sour Patch Kid kind of a thing going on here, which is lovely. Herbaceous? Maybe. There's a little bit of like herbaceous tone. It's like, maybe it's like the white portion of strawberries, that again, I don't want to call it underripe, because when I say underripe, we're talking about like a green is what I'm thinking about. Like, it's not necessarily green, but like maybe that is underripe. I mean, I guess that is an underripe portion of a strawberry, but so yeah, maybe there's some of that. Not less of this like cut grass and leaf or herbs or anything like that. It's more of like that white portion of strawberry, maybe like the leaf of that strawberry. But there's some touch of like the savoriness that's running through, which is really nice on top of this like really bright, fresh fruit, to juxtapose that with some savory. I think it's really nice. Minerality? Not hugely mineral here, but I get a little bit of like, schist, maybe like a granitic, like a sand, some sort of dusty, like rocky, wet rot. There's some of it here, like not super minerally, but I definitely got some mineral, like a crushed rock here for sure. No secondary for me. Definitely no tertiary. This one is too young, and this is very much a primary fruit driven one. Secondary, if anything, maybe coming from that whole cluster. We talked about whole cluster in the wine that we tasted on the monthly box in Argentina, the Becquignon, which is 100% whole cluster wine. There's some of that here, a little bit, but again, this is semi-carbonic, so you're not meant to like extract so much flavor and the things from the stems and all of that. But given that this was whole cluster, I get a little bit of that savoriness, maybe that like a little bit of like that. We call that bay leaf during the week. It's not necessarily bay, but like, yeah, there's some sort of that kind of like savory, herbaceous, coupled with that like white strawberry, unripe portion of fruit, as well as a lifted fruit and a fresh fruit is what I got here. All red though. All right, let's taste it. God damn it. It's so good. It's so delicious. I just love this style of Beaujolais. Sweetness, dry, right? Not. This is bone dry. There's no sugar on this whatsoever, right? Super dry. Acidity, it's good. Like my mouth is watering. It's like lower end of medium plus. I think I'm gonna land on medium plus right now. If this wine was like I don't have it at an exact temperature that I wanted. It's just like a little bit lower, warmer than I would have liked. But had this been a little bit cooler, probably acid will come out even more. But I'm gonna call this medium plus acid. But yeah, this is higher than medium, lower than medium plus is like right where we are right now. Tannin. There's a good tannin here, right? I'm gonna call that about like medium, lower than medium, higher than medium minus. But I'm gonna call this one medium actually. Decent amount of tannin. Again, as you get into these like mineral parts, whether it be granite or whether it be limestone, anytime there's a bedrock of these like a rocky, poor, infertile soil being introduced, you start to get a little more tannin, you start to get a little more acid. That's particularly true with the limestone. But with this one, there's a noticeably a little bit higher tannin than the first 2 weeks that we had, at least for me. And the character of the tannin here is really super fine, not really chewy, rustic kind of thing, but like really fine grain, which is great. Alcohol, I don't know, 13%. I feel a little hot, but not like over the top. Oh, it's 12%. So yeah, that's right in the lower end of medium, but yeah, medium. Body. Yeah, I'm gonna call that like lower end of medium, higher end of medium minus, but call it a medium. Not hugely big body, but there's nothing, it's not water. No mousse, we're gonna talk about that. Flavor intensity, it's very delicate. The fruit here is not like super punchy in the face. It's not like extracted for a long time, meaning it's soaked on the skins for a long time. Very delicate, but they're not shy. Like I get all those red fruit everywhere. I mean, just like a red fruit salad here, which is awesome. But yeah, ton of that red fruit that I mentioned. I get ton of that, like a touch of that rose petal. Again, not hugely floral, definitely more fruit driven than it is a flower driven. But very, very intense fruit. So rose, and then all that red fruit as well. Strawberry, red currant, cranberry, even that like red plum, even all of that across the board. Really tart, bright, Sour Patch Kid, high tone as well as fresh. Again, that carbonic. You know, every time you put a little carbonic on the wine, the fruit characters gets really lifted, and it becomes like a little bit of that high tone candy-ish, some of that, which is definitely running through here. Fresh, ripe. There's a little bit of like the savory component, which is not uncommon with the same Amour, honestly, to tell you the truth, because it's a little bit cooler. It's much more northerly than other parts. So sometimes you get a little more savory, but in general, it should be really just red, bright, poppy kind of a Beaujolais. But I do get a little bit, again, I don't know why my mind keeps going to that like white part of the strawberry, the cream part of the strawberry, and then like the leaf too. But again, no secondary and no tertiary, just really all here. But particularly here on the palate, I get a lot more of that, like the mineral, rocky soil influence here. Like there's tension in this wine, which plays a lot with the acid too, but like it's really top. Like it's really, there's kind of an electric kind of a tension in this wine, which is which I really appreciate. And then finally, the length. It's going. Yeah, I'm gonna call that a medium plus, higher than medium, lower than medium plus. Yeah, getting up there. Yeah, as this opens up a little bit, I'll probably call this a medium plus, but right now it's like somewhere between that medium plus. But being generous, let's call it medium plus. All right, conclusion. I think this wine is balanced. Also, before we get into that, just there's always this, always special with natural Beaujolais and the wines from this region. But I can almost always tell when the wine is not made in like a super, not calling that, I'm not saying that his winery is not clean, but this is definitely somebody's garage wine. You know what I mean? It's not made in like a lab setting, and there's a little bit of that kind of like wild, almost like a, there's some nervousness here. Like I'm gonna drink this over the next few days and report back to you guys, but right now there's some nervous, like I don't know if this wine's gonna fall apart. Like I don't think it's going to. It doesn't get me that nervous. But like, oh, I don't sense that much nervousness. But like, there's a little bit of that. Like especially with no sulfites added here, there's like no protection here. I mean, it's just like it's no safety net. It's raw dogging it. It's like a raw dog of a wine. You know, that's essentially what no sulfites is. It's like you're not putting any safety net on your wine, and something could go wrong. But you know, when it doesn't go wrong, it's so good. You know. I'm going to stop using that analogy because that's probably making some of you uncomfortable, but you know, that's an analogy I can give you right now. But like, there's some of that like nervous energy here. You know what I mean? Like when you, and it's I don't know if this is going to fall apart. It could, but I don't think it's going to, but it could, is how I feel, which is what makes it kind of fun. It's like kind of like right on that edge, all that acid, all that volatility, the VA that's there, is that VA gonna take off and this is gonna become just like a vinegar? Is mouse gonna show up? We talked about mouse last year and the 2 years before, right? And for those of you who don't know what it is, well, hopefully none of our wines get mouse this year, but it is just a thing that happens in the natural wine world. It's honestly tainting the natural wine world. There's so many wines with mouse that's happening where it's like, it just a wine, it leaves you with this like really kind of almost a gerbily, that's why it's called mouse, like a mousy, wet mouse kind of a smell and a taste in the back end of it. It's almost like popcorny too. It's weird. Like once you taste it, you know exactly what I mean. There's a chance this may get there, but I don't think it's going to anytime soon. But yeah, I just feel that nervousness. Yeah, hopefully it won't get there, but if it does, at least it will be for education purposes. Which is what I love. Like I love that about this wine, right? To me, again, that VA lifts up the fruit. It makes it really delicious. It makes it electric. It makes it feel lively to me. Like this wine, whether you hate it or love it, to me, this is a live wine. Like this is an actual wine. These are the kind of things that really resonate with me. In 6 Foot Wine Club and in natural wine world, the wines that just kind of have characters and that feel alive, rather than it may give you certain profiles that you want, that ripe fruit and all of that, but that doesn't feel like it has a kind of a life of its own. And to me, this wine definitely feels alive and has a life of its own. All right, anyways, I'll get off my tangent and wrap this up. So conclusion, we're talking about balance. I think this one is very well balanced. You may say that VA, some of that acid, some of the other things may throw you off, I think, but none of that seems overwhelming to me. This one is balance. Intensity, we call it medium plus on the nose, medium plus on the palate, so good intensity, medium plus. Complexity, we call that red flower, red fruit, all red fruit, but fresh, as well as a little underripe portion of the fruit. High tone fruit, so there's many different kind of characters of fruit. And then the rockiness, right? The minerality, but no secondary nor tertiary. So not super complex here, but yeah. So I call that about medium. Length we call it about somewhere between medium plus, but being generous, I decided to call it medium plus. So looking at all of that, this wine is balanced, medium plus intensity, medium complexity, medium plus length. Take an average all of that. We're leaning closer to medium plus than medium. So I'm gonna call this very good. This one is very good. Now, potential for aging. I think this wine is in a beautiful spot right now. This is exactly the kind of Saint Amour I love to drink. This is exactly the kind of Beaujolais style, that gamay style that I really like, this expression-wise, that really poppy, bright red fruit expression. Again, not necessarily that's better or worse than other. That's just what I like, but some of you may like much more deeper, darker kind of expression of Beaujolais, but I personally like this. This is beautifully right now, drink it right now, but it can age. So structure component, acid or tannin. We have medium plus acid, and then we have medium tannin, so decent, not crazy strong, but decent backbone, and then we have concentration medium plus, right, on the nose and the palate, and then complexity we have medium. So pretty strong concentration, decent complexity, and as some of these wines age, I think some of that kind of fresh red fruit that we're talking about is converted to non-fruit flavors and aromas, adding more complexity, right? The complexity is the only thing we call medium, right? So maybe it will bump up the complexity of this wine a little bit more. You are going to lose a little bit of freshness, but because there's a medium plus intensity, there's so much of it already available, I think it will be fine. So I think this wine could age. I would say, I don't know, maybe 5 years. I think you would have no problem drinking this between now and 5. And so 5 to 8 years would be my kind of guess on this one. But I'd say drink it now, between now and up to 5 years. Check back on it on probably, I would say, like 3 years, 5 years, and then after that, if you like the wine where it's going, then keep it. If not, drink it all within that 5-year period is what I would say. Yeah. And that's it. That's what we got for tasting. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. But before I let you go, here's the favorite part of everybody's game. How much do you think this wine costs on a retail shelf? And how much would you be happy paying for this? Think about that for a second. So we called it medium plus, right? We called it very good. This can age for 5 to 8 years. Yeah. How much do you think this should cost? Beaujolais, Cru Beaujolais. First Cru Beaujolais we're getting into. So but it's also a rock star of a producer. I mean, he's a very well known producer, kind of sought after. So, but rather lesser known Cru, Saint Amour. So how much do you think this would be? Put a pause, click pause if you wanna think about it. But otherwise, this wine will be $41. That's right. We're breaking into the 40s. I don't know. It's really hard for me to talk about Beaujolais being in 40s, because one of the things that was always great about Beaujolais is that it's one of the best bang for your buck here. And I'm not saying these people don't deserve it. These people, should charge less. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying, as somebody, it's just like having grown up with certain things with a certain quality level, and that quality level is still there, but the price just keeps going up and catching up, just like every other wine region. Yeah, I just think some of the value proposition is disappearing. But anyways, yeah, this would be $41. So whether it's worth it to you or not, I don't know. I think it's time now, but honestly, Cru Beaujolais is worth having that conversation over. You know, is this worth the price tag? I still do think it is. I think it's actually getting into the reasonable. This is what you would about expect for the quality and enjoyability that you are getting from that bottle and the price tag. But it's just that for the longest time, that value proposition was so good with Beaujolais, and that's one of the reasons why Psalms and wine people loved Beaujolais. But yeah, we're getting into it. So $41 is what we got. All right. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. And otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy this bottle. I'll report back in the next couple of days, like I have with the last couple. And otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy this bottle. Let me know what you think, honestly. I'm disappointed by the amount of communication that's not happening on the chat. I would love to hear all of you guys' thoughts. Even your opinion on the price. Is it too expensive? Do you think it's reasonably priced? It could be more. I don't know. Just whatever opinion. Let the conversation rolling. I want to hear about it. Yeah. So cool. Otherwise, enjoy your Friday, and then I will see you all next week. Next week is actually our first actual live tasting, the 4th week. So we're gonna do Julianas. Is that right? Yeah, Julianas. So we're gonna do Juliana. We're gonna live taste Julianas next week. So lucky for some of you, most of you, say you get me twice a week next week. Suckers. All right. I'll see you guys later. Enjoy your Friday. Bye bye.